Welcome to Inmate Tea with AMP. I'm your host, April, and on the line is my co-host, Jailhouse Lawyer Pig. And today we're being joined by an incarcerated individual. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, how y'all doing today?
We are doing great. We're glad to have you on. And for our viewers today, we're talking about asbestos exposure, and asbestos causes something that we've all heard about through commercials called mesothelioma. So, Michael, tell us about this asbestos exposure that you experienced in a North Carolina prison.
Okay, on January the 3rd, 2020, to work for CAP, which is a construction apprentice program, works for the state. It's like a construction, they do all kind of work for state buildings, stuff like that. I had been housed at the Caswell Correctional Institution, and we started work in building number 4, which is called SEG. It's the building that's into SEG, and we was putting air conditioning in for the new systems where they could take, because the buildings didn't even have air conditioning in them. We'd been running off the fans. And we went in and started doing the drop ceilings down. We removed all the clips and everything on the beams. We found out when they was put up in 1936, 37, somewhere around in that time frame, they had lead paint on.
How did you come to this conclusion? Was that tested?
Yes, ma'am. It was tested on the 25th, January the 25th, 2023, the third day of the project.
This call is from a North Carolina correctional facility.
It was tested for lead paint, and we had to keep on doing work on it. I mean, they never did stop the project and do it right. They just kept on working on it. And we kept on doing that, and then we ended up going to SEG. We had to cut a hole up through the roof to put air conditioning through the roof, and we was in the mechanical room, which is actually in SEG, and we got cut through. I think it was on the 13th. No, it was on the 14th of March, 2023. The material where we cut it through the roof, it was like it caused me to have a hard time breathing, and the dust was being removed out of the building, and it was like a fan had stationary in the room we was in. It was like blowing down the hallway and out the door. And that was on March 14th, 2023. Material that had been cut was blowing out the door as dust, was tested positive for asbestos. Everybody that was in segregation building on March 14th, 2023, working for ICP, was exposed to asbestos.
So, Mike, let me ask you a question. Now, when they tested this lead paint and they were aware of the asbestos that was in the building, did they ever provide y'all with the proper PPEs to protect yourself from this? Did they give y'all masks, gloves, suits, and everything?
No, sir. We had only thing we had at that time was our T-shirts. We had wrapped up. We had it wrapped up around our face while we was cutting it out. They didn't even want to give us the respirators because we had to do like an 8-hour course to be able to use it, and they didn't want to even give us one of those.
So you're saying the only thing that they provided y'all with to protect yourself from asbestos that causes a lung cancer and attacks your lungs is a T-shirt that other people's done and more, but they ask you to tie it around your face and protect yourself from breathing in this harmful chemical.
That's basically what it was.
Okay.
Yep. The second day, the girl in medical, she actually gave us some dust masks, but nothing from the construction program. ICP never gave us nothing. My boss, Hopkins, Charles, he said that he didn't want to pay for to have to go through this class.
And so when you're there and you're experiencing problems, breathing and stuff like you expressed, did you ever express it to your boss at that point? Like, we're having trouble breathing here, the medical aspects of what you were experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, we was all complaining about being in the room with the dust because we was having to come out. We couldn't breathe. I mean, it's like so bad, so thick, you couldn't breathe.
What response would he ever give you in response to, your concerns about your health?
He kept saying, well, the hole ain't going to get cut on its own. He said, y'all going to have to cut it out. He said, then you can come out here. But we kept on. I mean, it's like we worked 2 days in it before I was actually the one that got cut up through the roof. And on the 14th, that was the day I cut through the roof, was on the 14th, 2023. So we actually stopped on the 15th and cleaned up. and that was their last day of work that week. But what I did do was I went to medical on the 17th because I couldn't even hardly breathe. My lungs felt like they were so full. My chest hurt all the time. So I went to medical, and I told them that I thought I'd been in some kind of asbestos or something because this whatever it was like filled up my lungs. And when my gloves was on, that my hands was like raw. When I went to medical, I had to write out a paper explaining, that I thought I got in asbestos and all that. And my boss man, when I went to work Monday, they took me out of work for a few days so they could do an X-ray of my.
This call is from a North Carolina correctional facility.
When I told my boss that they was going to do this X-ray and that the fact that I went to medical, they was going to take me out of work, he gets mad because I went to medical and told them that, they was going to take me out of work, this and that and other, and I put on paper that I thought I got exposed to some kind of asbestos. And he said, man, you shouldn't have told him that. You shouldn't have told him that. But, I was trying to do what was right for me.
Exactly. As you should. You should be concerned about your health. Yeah. And he should, too, as well, being somebody that, works for the state and, is entrusted with your well-being as not only your employer, but somebody that works for the state. And you are a ward of the state being incarcerated with North Carolina.
Yes, exactly. That's the way I looked at it, is like, why shouldn't I go? Because I felt something that endangered my lungs, so I was going to go check it out. But he got mad about it anyway. And they did an X-ray, which they couldn't find nothing in my lungs. I guess, and my lungs was inflamed, but it don't show anything, as far as that. But
yeah.
I had to go through and do a breathing thing. I can't remember what it's called, but I had to go through medical. And I got on the inhaler, and I got all kinds of stuff in to clear my lungs out, all because of his neglect on what he didn't do, or they, because it was Hoskins and Measley was the two boss men over the job, and neither one of them pursued the right proper gear to do what we was doing.
Yeah. So what happens after that, after you're out for so many days with this, trying to recover with your breathing issues? Are you allowed to go back to work at that point?
Well, they let me go back to work, but they kept me kind of like on the outside of the building. But what it was, they found out that the material that, since I went to medical, they had to go test the material. They had some state engineers. They come in on March the 16th and took some tests and whatnot and had it sent off. The test come back on 3/22, I think it was. The test come back showing positive for the material that they had sent in. And that's when we found out on the job site that the stuff we'd been working in was positive for asbestos.
Oh, my gosh.
Mike, let's go back to this medical situation. Now, you said that, you went to medical, your boss man got upset with you for reporting this. Okay, and you said medical gave you the inhalers and stuff like this. Now, are they still, screening you and, are you getting continued medical care and went to outside doctors to be tested and looked at for this? Because, from my understanding of mesothelioma from being exposed to asbestos, it doesn't happen right then. This can take place over a period of time, and it can grow inside your lungs. It can lay dormant in your lungs. So are they continuing the medical care? Are they continuing to do tests and look at your lungs?
No, they took me to Alexander, and we did a breathing thing, like a breathing test, and my lungs, they said my lungs was good as far as my air flow in. But other than that, they've done no more testing whatsoever.
Okay. What about from a legal aspect? Have you ever submitted a grievance or brought anything to the forefront with a grievance, just grieving the fact that you were exposed to this, to, set up the proper health care? Because honestly, from the way I see this, you weren't sentenced to a death sentence. And even once you finish your time in prison and you're released from prison, this is something that will follow you home.
I filed a grievance, but when it got to Caswell, they turned it down because they said it was not in the time frame, which is a bunch of bull, because it was exactly the time frame that fell in, and that it was their excuse to do away with it. And when it came back like that, they didn't want to argue it here because they didn't have anything to do with it. Caswell turned it down, said, "Oh, it's not in the time frame. We can't do it now," which is their excuse to say we're not fooling with it.
So for our viewers, I want our viewers to understand what they're doing here. Being that you were the whistleblower to say, "Hey, I've inhaled asbestos. I'm going to medical. I'm going to get checked out." Okay, when it tested positive and you had all this information, you filed a grievance. What a grievance is, for our viewers, Mike can actually file a lawsuit for injury for breathing in this asbestos. But they're saying, no, he didn't file it within the 90-day time frame that it's supposed to have been filed in. And therefore, we're going to just undermine his situation. We're going to undermine the severity and the seriousness of him inhaling this asbestos that could possibly and potentially be hazardous to him and cause him to catch mesothelioma, which is a cancer into your lungs that is fatal, that can kill you, and that can also cause COPD and other injuries.
Yeah. Well, they was people that was actually housed at Caswell. A friend of mine that actually, he's in my hometown, he was at the camp when all this was going on, and him and some other people wrote grievances on him while they was there, and they took him in and told him there would be consequences if they pushed this grievance on through. So they turned the grievance down because they didn't want to deal with being on the camp, having to deal with consequences.
Wow.
So now we're going into coercion and threatening, and they're going to cause some kind of harm to them, whether it's physical harm or putting them in segregation or, destroying their property or whatever. Wow.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, it's like when we had the fans blowing out through where we was in the room, we had like cardboard ducts set up to pull the fan out to a side door. And the side door led right to a walkway going into the chow hall. So when we cut into the asbestos, all that was blowing on everybody that went to lunch, went to chow that evening. Because we worked the way we worked. Everybody was on that camp was exposed. They don't understand it, but it was blowing right out the door right to them because they had to walk to the walkway one way going in, or it was blowing right on. But they didn't have a clue what was coming out that door,
And I'm sure the prison never made any attempts to make people aware that they could have been exposed, did they?
No, they ain't said a word about it to anybody. And the thing about it is that there are people there right now, even everybody housed at Caswell, even people that houses inmates and workers work there are being exposed to asbestos because the hole we cut up through the roof goes right straight to the heat vent. When the fans come on to pull the heat up out of the roof, it's pulling asbestos fabrics out of it right now because they never sealed it off.
So this is something this occurred in 2023 that you became aware of the asbestos that's at Caswell Correctional. Yes. But you're saying that even now in 2025, they're still being exposed because it's never been remedied, correct?
No, correct. They never went in and put the right sealer on the stuff that's contaminated. They just closed the bottom of the hole up. The top's still open because they never done nothing in the roof.
Wow.
And all the heat vents is going out every day on it.
Is this blowing into like a dorm where people are, or is this blowing into seg, or where is this at exactly?
Actually coming out of the roof, the way the heat vent comes out of the roof, seg sits right next to the chow halls. The vent is on that side of the building, and the fan circulates the heat out, pulls the heat out. It's pulling out everything right there, spinning it around in the atmosphere right above where you're going to chow every day.
So everybody that is on that camp or has been on that camp since 2023 could have been exposed to asbestos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind they are. I mean, they can't help it because it never was sealed up the proper way of sealing it up. It was never done. I used to work for a company, Neo Corporation in Waynesville, years ago, back in 89 and 90, when they, you have to go in and seal it off, and you have to put stuff on it to contaminate it. That way there's no vapor, no nothing coming off of it. Yeah. They did none of that.
Wow. I
had wrote a letter to OSHA, Raleigh, North Carolina, about the situation, and they wrote me back and told me that they didn't deal with incarcerated people, and I needed to write some other organization. And I'm thinking, how are you not? But I'm thinking, if it's OSHA, you're over everybody. It don't matter who it is.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, because I know they have to follow the OSHA standards just as everybody else do, because they have to undergo a inspection, a OSHA inspection every year.
The
You know what, Mike?
CAT Corporation, they have the ICP Corporation, the CAT, what they call them CAT now, but it's ICP. They have their own people comes in for OSHA. You know, it's state taking care of the state. What it boils down to is that's where the problem is. It's like, man, there's nothing getting done because it's like a buddy system, you know.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much one hand wash the other and both hands wash the face. They're keeping it all in house. Nobody knows what's going on within the prison system, because you got these people that's coming in doing the inspections for the state, and they work for the state. So, you know, how you're monitoring yourself. How can you monitor yourself and say, hey, everything's okay? You know?
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's like the same crew paying for everything, so there's nothing going to get done out of it.
Yeah. So what about your health at this point, Mike? What are you doing do you try to go be seen, to have more checkups done, to look out for this kind of stuff that could be affecting you due to being exposed?
Right at the moment, I had a heart attack last year, and I'm having to go through stuff on that right now. And it's like, I've not really got back into having my lungs and stuff looked at, because I went through that heart attack, and I've been going through trying to figure out what's wrong with my heart.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's another hurdle coming up, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're doing okay.
Let me ask you this, Mike. When you go to your heart doctor, you know, your lungs pumps oxygen throughout your body, and your heart's got to have oxygen. Your blood is running through your heart. So just for something that I feel that you could bring up to your doctor, I would bring that up to my doctor, and I would be like, hey, look, I had this heart attack, and my lungs is what gives me oxygen. So I would like my lungs, I would like to know if you could set me up with a doctor that could check my lungs, because I'm assuming that you're going to an outside doctor like the Chapel Hill or somewhere like that for your heart, a heart specialist.
Yes.
So
that's where Chapel Hill.
Maybe you can play that into, you know, getting the proper medical care for this too, or just keeping a good screening on it. Because Mike, you know, like I know, when you get a doctor that cares in here, you got to try to put the bug in their ear to give you the proper medical care at all times, because you've just told us, you've told our viewers that the state of North Carolina is saying, hey, we're not gonna honor your grievance. We're not gonna let this get outside of the prison. So your resources is limited. You're not able to walk out of prison. You were sentenced to life. You weren't sentenced to death. Okay, and there may be people out there that say, hey, if he was sentenced to life, whatever he done, he deserves to die in prison. And that's their opinion, the same way they may say about me. But the thing is, we was not sentenced to death, and we were not sentenced to suffer while we're in the prison system. We were sentenced to do this life sentence, do our time, and we're entitled to proper health care and a proper opportunity to have and live a clean, healthy, and productive life while we're in here. So with that being said, Mike, you know, just maybe you can appeal to this heart doctor, and they can get you some screening and keep an eye on that, because that deals with your heart.
Yeah. Did you ever
I agree.
Did you ever have any kind of heart issues prior to this heart attack?
No, I've always had a clean bill of health.
Well,
from the time I was a teenager, I've never been to the doctor.
Okay.
I don't even like taking cold pills or anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a doctor, but I do have Google, and that's close. No, I'm just kidding. But I do have Google, and and according to Google, that asbestos exposure can be linked to an increased risk of heart disease, including heart attacks. So research does indicate that asbestos exposure significantly elevates the risk of developing cardiovascular diseases such as heart attacks. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There you go, Mike. I mean, you can quote this to your doctor next time you go in there, buddy, and you tell them, say, hey, I've been doing my research, and a exposure to asbestos that causes mesothelioma, it can be led,
I'll do
it
that.
can be linked to heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't either, but
Well,
I just looked it up for
What I would like to do is, a friend of mine, he was that well with me. I would like to get him to write you all and explain what he's seen when I left work every day,
you. Yeah.
and explain to y'all like what he's seen, how I looked every day.
Okay.
You know, because I was covered in dust leaving the job site and all that. I'll get him to write y'all
Okay.
and let you know. He was one of the ones that actually wrote a grievance too on that thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Well,
would be
anyone
good.
that can give us insight, brother, we're willing to, air it. We want to thank you, man, for having the courage to write us and come on and tell your story, because as a fellow person in here with you, I know how hard it is and how cumbersome it can be to actually want to tell your story and stand up against the system. I know, the backlash that you could face. And for you to do this is monumental, brother. It's monumental.
And to do this for the well-being of others. Yeah.
What I would like, too, is for an attorney that would like to represent me on this, I would be willing to sit down and talk to him. But it's just, I'm indigent. I'm in here indigent, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, this ain't right. This whole system ain't right.
No, it's not. And we just thank you for coming on and bringing this issue to the light, because so many people were affected by it and are still affected by it. Think about all these people that have been exposed to this and continue to be exposed to it. And the prison system knows about it and they just don't care.
Yeah, they ain't said a word about it to nobody, not even their own people that work there. That's why it don't make no sense. Them people going to work every day thinking they're safe. They're not. I mean, they're breathing that dust just like an inmate is.
Wow. Well, we thank you, Mike, for coming on the podcast.
Offices and everyone.
Everybody, yeah. Well, the office is right below the segregation building. It sits on a level, kind of like an elevated level. They're actually below segregation, so it's coming right down through the wind and everything else.
Well, wow. Go ahead, April. What were you saying?
I was just thanking Mike for coming on the podcast. We appreciate you. And we've had a good time talking with you.
Well, thank y'all. Thank y'all for doing what you do. I mean, because we have opportunity to speak up, let people know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, Mike, it takes courage for you to come on here and tell this.